This podcast is intended for investment professionals only.
Hello and welcome to LGIM Talks. My name is Andrew Lowry. I'm a content manager here at LGIM, and today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence. It's very much the topic du jour, so we've assembled a crack team of experts to run you through everything you need to know about AI from an investment perspective. I'm joined by Nelson Mery, who's a senior fixed income fund manager here at LGIM, Aude Martin, senior ETF Investment Specialist, and we've brought in from the outside Matthew Griffin, founder and CEO of the 311 Institute. Nelson, I'd like to begin with you and to get an overview of the technical side of AI here. First of all, let's define our terms. What are we talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence?
Hi everyone. Yeah, sure. So it's in a very simplistic way, you can say that artificial intelligence or AI for short is mainly software that mimics and generates human behaviors. So it can be done in many different ways, like think planning, generating ideas, using location awareness, understanding speech and visuals, and decision making, of course. With normal software, we're the ones that define the rules and conditional logic, so to automate what we want the software to do. With AI, it actually doesn't need any of these predefined human rules, and it can generate them itself.
And there's been a huge uptick in interest this year centered around large language models, in particular ChatGPT. Can you give us a brief overview on how they work in layman's terms?
Sure. So most people at this stage, I think, will have heard about ChatGPT, which is probably the highest profile front end these days for large language model. In this case, the underlying model is called GPT-4, which is an iteration of a previous model. And essentially, a large language model is nothing more than an AI model trained on a very large data set, which is capable of understanding and generating human-like text or language. This makes it very popular because it's an easy entry point to the AI world and its benefits and applications. Large language models typically consist of an artificial neural network, which is something that's been around for a while, which has sometimes billions of parameters, and GPT-4 reportedly actually has gone over the 1 trillion parameter model and trains its learning on large quantities of text.
One thing that might surprise people is that when ChatGPT was launched, the underlying model was still in the GPT-3 generation, which was, I think it was about 18 months old at that point, which is quite a long time period in AI terms. And obviously you mentioned GPT-4 has come to market more recently. Do you think this trajectory of progress will continue? Is it going to be an exponential curve?
Yeah, my short answer is I strongly believe that yes, we'll see a similar trajectory for at least the foreseeable future. We're only in the beginnings of this massified AI and its applications, and as their applications and potential increase, so will the software will have a tendency to evolve. I certainly see it having a similar path to what we saw on hardware, meaning computers and that sort of thing. That if you think about it in the beginning, there would be huge machines that take several stories high in terms of volumes and did some things that were deemed amazing back then, but were actually extremely simple and for today's standards. Most of us now carry a smartphone that actually is, multiple thousands of times, or perhaps even higher, more powerful than these first computers. So I certainly see something similar to, for those that know Moore's law, happening in the AI space, which is kind of an easy prediction since software and hardware go in tandem. As devices become more powerful, so they can process more data and in a faster way. This is important for AI because machine learning, which is a type of AI that enables computers to learn from data, to rely on large data sets to be effective. So the more data an AI system has to work with, the better it can learn and faster it can learn. And also its performance will increase at the same time.
Sure. I mean, there's been a huge amount of excitement about what the technology can do, and it is undeniably impressive. But there's also been an explosion of marketing speak and buzzwords and boosters around the sector. If we take a pretty cool-headed look, I mean, are there still limitations to the technology?
I think there's definitely limitations. There's mostly fears, and people have their doubts and questions about how far it can go. As in any evolving technology, there are always concerns and limitations. I recently read a piece actually produced by an investment bank that mentioned some of the limitations and some of the consequences of some of the concerns that we can see in generative AI, which is a type of AI which is mostly what we've been talking about in terms of the ChatGPT. So I'll list four of these. If you read around, there's quite a lot of different views about these things, but one of them, it's quite an interesting term for it. It's called hallucination, which then leads to libel risk. And as an example of one of these things that actually has happened, is that an Australian mayor is reading the first world defamation lawsuit over ChatGPT content. Then you have bias, which leads to reputational risk. And again, an example is the OpenAI chatbot has spat out biased musings despite guardrails that were set up initially. So you can see that even though you have they're called guardrails, the software can actually go over those not quite easily, but it can happen. Then you have data privacy, which obviously leads to security and confidentiality risk. And as an example, Samsung has banned their staff of using AI after spotting some ChatGPT data leak. Then you have unclear sourcing, which leads to legal risk and IP copyright. So Getty Images, for those that know it, which is a popular provider of images and art, is actually suing the creators of this tool called Stable Diffusion, which is an AI art tool for scraping their contents. And then you have deliberate misuse, of course. Operational risk will be a consequence of this, and an example is how AI is being used currently to spread misinformation. And there's already a big fear coming up in the upcoming US elections that some of this technology can be used for a less great purpose. Some of these concerns can easily be tackled, others not so easily, but I definitely believe that we need 3 AI components to collaborate to enhance the human experience and to avoid the use of AI in not so clear and not so fair ways. So you definitely need to create trustworthy AI. You need regulation about the use of AI and AI products. You already start seeing some countries, European Union, etc., starting to create some legislation that tackles this directly. And also you need to reach a global consensus of when we use AI and when we don't. So all of these are obviously very easy to establish and to mention, but how to actually implement these, it may not be so easy.
That's a lot to take in there. It's fascinating to see the contours of the next couple of decades. They're almost visible before us right now. Paul, I want to talk to you a little bit about the investment angle, because we are an investment management company after all. Let's break it down into hardware and software, even if that is a little bit of an artificial distinction. First of all, NVIDIA has recently become a $1 trillion company as a result of its kind of connection to AI. Why are chip makers like NVIDIA such a core way to invest in the AI theme in a way that maybe other tech firms aren't?
Hello, everyone. Yes, thanks for this question. Chips are an essential component of artificial intelligence, exactly. And, we need it for it to be used and reach its full potential. So AI has hardware at its core. If you think of AI or, machine learning models, they depend upon a vast computing resources, a lot of data. And so you do need that hardware component to perform those calculations. And so the path of AI is intrinsically tied to the path of computing power. And this is why you've seen those chip makers, leading the way from a performance standpoint since the beginning of the year. But then if you think of other technologies that could also help, we need to bear in mind as well of quantum AI. It's a term that, some of you might have read about or heard about recently. And one key example is ChatGPT. We've been speaking about it today. So if you take the example of ChatGPT, it has around 175 billion parameters at the model, like as a model today. But if this model were to grow to trillions of parameters, it requires a lot more, computing power and storage power. And so this is why those technologies essentially will be used in the future. So yes, we've seen chip makers definitely grow over the recent months, but then there's other technologies around that are also leading the way from a performance standpoint as a result of AI expanding.
If we look at the big tech stories over the past 30 years or so, it's a lot of the real success stories being insurgents or startups, in search and social media, Google, Facebook, companies like that. AI doesn't seem to be following that kind of narrative. So why do you think that is?
Yes, so I mean, OpenAI is a good example because it seems to have stolen a march of the incumbents, which really raised the question recently of whether today's big tech giants may lose their status when it comes to AI. But thinking of the resources that are needed to compete in that space, those big tech or tech giants have the best experts. They do have people in the field that have the knowledge and the technical knowledge to be able to be competitive in that space. But they also have large-scale data sets, which is needed to perform the research, but also to be able to develop the technology. So the hardware requirements could eventually lead to dominance by a few, but we're really too early stage now to know that. And if we look at the semiconductor space that we're discussing earlier, the largest players, including NVIDIA, are also Analog Devices, Global Unit Chip, Ambarella, Teradyne, all of these companies, this is just to name a few, that are leading in that space. But those companies, they have the scale and they have the internal research and capability to develop the technology. So that's what makes the difference.
Speaking of applications, you mentioned the semiconductor space. AI requires infrastructure enablers while it's also disrupting multiple industries at the same time. Can you open that up a bit?
Yes, of course. So yes, AI as an infrastructure, it expands across more than the semiconductor industry. When you think about, for example, cloud providers, they need to store and share this massive amount of data required for AI to just run. So Twilio is just a good example of that type of enablers. But you also have cognitive computing. So this provides a higher level of human-like problem solving by using computer-based neural networks to process information. So this is exactly the definition of AI, that we were given just a moment ago. But then regarding application, it's even broader than the enablers themselves. AI is reshaping all industries. So from consumer experiences in the gaming, in the entertainment industry, but also e-commerce, where AI understands really what consumers and customers want and need, and that improves customer engagement. And then if you think of factory automation, supply chain efficiencies, this is where AI is also very important. And then just to finish on another example, healthcare. AI is needed for early diagnosis and better care that is given to patients.
Thank you very much. Equities connected with AI obviously done very well this year. Is this really a hinge point? Will people look back on 2023 as the point when AI started contributing materially to valuations across multiple industries?
Yes, I mean, AI is definitely a key part, if not a leading part this year of the tech markets that have recovered, from 2022's drawdown. But there's others like cybersecurity or robotics, and e-commerce is also starting to pick up. I think when we look at AI and we think of the performance of those companies, they've been also leading prior to 2022 as a drawdown. And I'd say even after the pandemic, when we've seen the boom in cloud, around 2020, this is also a topic that has been picked up and then dropped and now picked up again with another news. But then looking at AI's companies' valuations, they're still on the cheaper side compared to historical values. So if you look at enterprise value to sales, it's below long-term average, and it's really the same for forward PE. And there's really tends to be a focus on the large cap companies, really the big tech companies when we look at those topics. But for AI, it's not only about the Amazon and Alphabet, although they do play a critical role. But if you think of companies like Darktrace, C3, or Rapid7, they also are a leader in AI, but they have more medium size, I would say.
Matt, turning to you for a slightly longer term view for what all this means. I want to talk about a few possible futures. Taking the optimistic view, what kind of bottlenecks in the economy can AI?
So, hey everyone. So let's face it, I mean, the economy's got a whole variety of different bottlenecks right now. Now, when I'm speaking to board members around the world, different companies doing different things, one of the biggest bottlenecks that we actually seem to have is actually the access to human talent and human capital. That's it. I mean, I don't think I've met a single CEO over the past couple of years, basically, that said, hey, we can get enough people with the right skills and everything's rosy, right? Now, when we have a look at AI, on the one hand, we can actually use technologies like these large language models, ChatGPT, Google Bard. We've got Claude coming up because we need to give them funky names. When we actually start using these models, basically, we can actually upskill human talent, basically like crazy. That's it. So we're already using artificial intelligence within a variety of different Fortune 50 companies, typically, to accelerate learning and development by threefold. we can take a person who is either a newbie, kind of 101 level, to a 201 level using these technologies in next to no time, and we can take them from 201 to 301 within a couple of weeks. So when we actually have a look at using these technologies to unlock, should we say, human potential, human capital, basically, and actually give companies greater access to talent and the skills that they need, that's one. Now, when we start talking about automating different jobs and tasks as well, there's a kind of flip side. So increasingly, you know, we're all T-shaped individuals within the companies that we work for. You know, we're really good at one thing, but technology increasingly means that we need to become kind of W-shaped individuals. So if you're not a coder, for example, I can automate programmers today. You know, we've done that again with ChatGPT and these other technologies. However, if I automate the skill of a coder and I put a nice fancy interface on the front of it, then all of a sudden I have democratized access to that skill for people who can't code. When we have a look at sort of outside of that sort of sphere, outside of talent shortages and skills shortages, basically we've got personalized experiences at scale, decision making. You know, a lot of the people I meet say the problem that we have is we just have too much information and our little puny human brains can't process it all. So as we start slapping conversational artificial intelligence in front of the mic, you know, increasingly we're able to ask these machines and say, based on what you know, the information that you actually have access to, I'm interested in the future strategy of my company, future of markets, whatever it happens to be. Tell me about them. So, you know, when we look at optimization, productivity improvements, there's a ton of bottlenecks. And even when we actually have a look at things like economic stimulus, you know, over in China, we're starting to see the development of central bank digital currencies, which allow China to monitor their economy in real time. But now you start overlaying an artificial intelligence politician out of the Foreign Office, typically, and we can start seeing the development of artificially intelligent-based policy making, which can be applied to a regional or even the global economy, shall we say, in real time.
We've always got to think about in terms of the bull case and the event case, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm old enough to remember when driverless cars were going to be on the streets of every city by 2020. Is the current wave of AI excitement another boom and bust in that cycle of hype and excitement and disappointment, or is this the real thing?
Yeah, so it's interesting because you use the word boom and bust and then hype. Now, yeah, we're absolutely in a period of hype. Now, you know, when we have a look at hype, basically we're in this great place at the moment where everyone's talking about ChatGPT. Doesn't matter where I go, what kind of level of person I'm talking to. I was with the Vice Minister of the Ministry of Science and Technology in China the other week. That's it, and he was talking about it. You know, everyone's talking about it. So we're absolutely basically in that hype cycle. But human attention actually kind of wanes after a while. I mean, yeah, if we were doing this podcast about a year ago, we'd be talking about the metaverse. You know, a year before that, it would be Web3, blockchain, that kind of thing. Yeah, NFTs. I said, we've forgotten them already. So we do go through this hype. But when you actually have a look at the underlying sort of the foundational use cases of artificial intelligence, you know, in the next 6 months, okay, we're going to be talking about these things less. You know, we'll be talking about quantum tech or something maybe. That's it. But nevertheless, yeah, they are still going to be there wearing away in the background, taking a bigger slice of the pie. We're just not going to be talking about them as much. So, yeah.
A lot of workplace technology can be kind of boiled down to faster processing speeds, better connectivity, and automation of existing labor.
Yeah.
I mean, how this feels different. This feels like something that's materially different in how we actually experience our lives and how we work. I mean, is that fair to say?
So it is. Now, I mean, when we have a look at the workplace, so next week I'm going to be doing some talks basically on the future of workplace with someone everyone knows, so that'll come out later. But when we actually have a look at the future of the workplace, you know, fundamentally, we come to a place of work, a building, basically because we actually want interaction. We need to collaborate and whatever it happens to be. Now, typically, when we have a look at the future of the workplace, we've kind of got two modes that we can think of. So companies have kind of got two approaches. You've got companies out there that will use artificial intelligence to automate their workforce. You know, we've seen that with IBM. They've just announced that they're going to automate 10,000 people, basically using AI, which is a small percentage of their workforce. We've seen British Telecom, 7,800 people that they're going to automate using AI. But the headlines, interestingly enough, basically are they say, we are going to automate 10,000 jobs with AI. You know, they're not trying to sort of sugarcoat it. But on the other sort of flip side, automation is fine, but you're taking a huge amount of human capital basically out of the building forever. So the companies I talk to, we talk about augmenting human skills with artificial intelligence. And when you start augmenting people, that's when you really start seeing AI being used as a coach, a strategic partner, a collaborator. That's where you combine the beautiful messiness of humans, that sort of illogical, creative mess, basically, that we are, with the kind of, shall we say, beautiful logic of an artificial intelligence that just goes, shut up, these are the facts. I don't care about, your illogical conclusions.
Closer to home, we're talking about the workplace.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're an investment management company. What kind of impact do you anticipate AI having on how our industry operates and how we go about our business?
So
am I out of a job?
So one of the questions I get asked that question quite regularly. Now, this is where we look at sort of Maslow's hierarchy, for example. Now, when we have a look at, say, Robin Hood investors, inevitably artificial intelligence can actually just automate wealth advisors and investment managers. We've seen that basically with a couple of UK companies, actually, because they said these AIs are producing better returns, basically, and actually they cost a lot less. So everyone in the investment management space quakes in their boots. But when we start going up the stack, having a look at high net worth individuals, HNWs, UHNWs, they don't want to be talking to an artificial intelligence. They still very much want to actually see a human, slap someone around the face and say, why did you get me to invest in that? And all these kinds of different things. So the use of artificial intelligence within the investment management space, firstly, comes down to what kind of demographic are you actually serving? But secondly, when we have a look at, when we actually have a look at it, increasingly we can use AI basically for decision making, data mining at scale, and all kinds of different things. Some of the other things, 7 years ago, I was sitting in front of Bloomberg and saying, hey, in the future, these AIs are going to be able to create their own content, and was going to be talking about the dissolution of trust. And everyone basically at Bloomberg at that point was like, oh my God. When we actually have a look at some of these artificial intelligences, as we humans rely more on these AIs for investment data mining, data decision making, and everything else, by 2030, it's estimated that 10% of the internet is going to be 10% of the data on the internet is going to be generated by AI. Now, if you're starting to suck in data that you haven't validated, you haven't confirmed is actually authentic and accurate and everything else as an investment manager, your portfolio models basically are going to be skewed. So we call this model collapse. So while basically there are lots of different sort of productivity and efficiency things that we could actually go into, I think realistically, the biggest impact is going to be really around automation, access to information and patterns, and the danger that we have when we put too much faith in artificial intelligence decision making.
Right, well, that's a huge amount to take in, a lot of ground covered in not a lot of time. So just to wrap up, I'd like to go around the table. Many people may not be as familiar with this topic as you guys are. So I'd like to just go around with it. If you've got one takeaway for someone who's maybe heard a bit about AI in the background on the radio, but otherwise isn't too clued in, what kind of key point would you like to make? Nelson, you go first.
Yeah, sure. I think, being very, very short in my answer, I think these are undoubtedly very exciting times. I think it's, as Matt said, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of pros and cons. There's a lot of even learning on how to use these tools. So I think, I'm very excited for the next 10 years or so and see how all of this pans out.
Aude?
Yeah, I think one key takeaway for me is that, AI is not just what you hear in the news. AI is a lot more than, ChatGPT or the BBC headline or, any news that you might read on a regular basis. It really impacts every aspect of our lives as individuals, as companies, even as governments and public infrastructure. So, I think it's important to bear in mind that it touches all industries from, as I said earlier, e-commerce, healthcare, really industries that are key and important for us as, patients and consumers, for example. But also that's why we believe AI is a long-term theme.
Go and access a platform like ChatGPT. If you haven't, basically go and thump in a load of questions, talk to it and everything else, kind of put the saddle on the bull, as we say. But then secondly, also as adults, because mostly adults basically listening to this podcast, realize the limitations of your own creativity. Now, what I mean by that is what you have an artificial intelligence that gives you access to all of the world's knowledge. It's got 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human brain, a verbal IQ of 155, and it learns 300 million times faster than the human brain. So you have a system that has access to all the world's knowledge. Now, try to think of more than 5 questions to ask a system that has access to 1,000 times more general knowledge than any human on the planet. And all of a sudden, we start realizing the limitations of adult creativity, because we'll ask the first 5 questions and then we'll really start thinking, what do I ask it now? So this is where we can use these AIs increasingly to broaden our own horizons, improve our own creative potential, and actually do new things in new ways.
It's a brave new world. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
As a reminder, this podcast is intended for investment professionals only and shouldn't be shared with a non-professional audience. This podcast should not be taken as an invitation to deal in legal and general investments. Any views expressed during this recording belong to the individuals and are based on market conditions at the time of the recording and do not reflect the views of legal and general investment management. Forward-looking statements are by their nature subject to significant risks and uncertainties and are based on internal forecasts and assumptions and should not be relied upon. Where individual stocks are mentioned, these do not constitute a recommendation to buy or sell any security and are for illustrative purposes only. Legal and General Investment Management Limited is authorised and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. For full terms and conditions, please visit our website. To find more content, you can check us out on Twitter, LinkedIn, and our website. Copyright 2023. Legal and General Investment Management Limited. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced or transmitted in any form or by any means, including photocopying and recording, without the written permission of the publishers. This material is issued by Legal and General Investment Management Asia Limited, the Licence Corporation BBB 488, regulated by the Hong Kong Securities and Futures Commission, for professional investors only.